With two preseason games down and just one left to play, the bubble is about to burst for a bunch of players on the Seahawks 90-man roster. Who's going to be on the right side of it and who, unfortunately, is going to be getting a pink slip when we get to final cutdown day? Going to be diving into 12 players heading into Friday's preseason finale for the Seahawks. They'll be traveling to Arrowhead Stadium to face the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not expecting any starters to play in this game. We haven't seen starters to this point. It looks like Mike McDonald is ready to roll through the entire exhibition schedule without starters getting any snaps. They won't be doing joint practices this week in Kansas City, but it's a short week between exhibition games. So all the eyes are going to be on the bubble players, and unfortunately some players who aren't even on the bubble. But the ones we're going to be looking at today are clearly on the bubble. And I want to start in the backfield, which this has become more compelling because of the injuries that the Seahawks have had at running back. Jadarian Price is back healthy, but you're not going to see him playing in the preseason finale. He's not going to get a single snap in the preseason. He's going to get thrown into the fire as an NFL running back in week one in that Super Bowl rematch against the New England Patriots. But Emmanuel Wilson, who was signed in free agency from Green Bay, the 230-pound battering ram, has been out for a couple of weeks with a hamstring injury, and that has opened the door for a couple other backs to potentially make this football team. And I think the biggest beneficiary right now in that regard is Jacardia Wright, who had the 69-yard rushing touchdown against Tennessee on Sunday night. You got to see the burst, the acceleration at 220-plus pounds. He's the other back that is on this roster currently who can fill that void left behind without a healthy Zach Charbonnet, 215, 220-plus pound runner that has physicality between the tackles and also has enough burst to be able to hit some home runs. He didn't do much with the rest of his carries on Sunday night, not necessarily his problem, not his fault. The blocking wasn't great, ironically enough, with how beautiful it was on that 69-yard touchdown. He didn't have much to work with on the rest of his carries, but he had a few catches out of the backfield, no drops. I thought he helped himself. If Emmanuel Wilson is not ready for week one, if that hamstring injury is something that's going to be lingering, that doesn't guarantee that Wright is going to be on the 53-man roster, but he becomes a priority to get back on the practice squad to elevate for that week one game against the Patriots. And if Wilson has to miss more than that, then maybe you are looking at a 53-man roster spot for him because he's the most natural fit there. If you have a healthy Emmanuel Wilson, I thought going into this second preseason game that Velus Jones Jr. was going to be the one that maybe could sneak on the roster because of his receiving background. Former receiver. He's actually been a receiver on the roster for the Seahawks this offseason a couple of times. They just move him back and forth between running back, receiver. He had a really quiet game on Sunday night. Not much to work with. The couple times he carried the football, only had 2 catches for 6 yards. Kind of an underwhelming performance, but he has had a really good training camp and preseason practice set this month. So there's plenty of reasons why the Seahawks may feel bullish about having Velus Jones as that extra back rather than Jacardia Wright. But I think that he's another player that they should be able to get to their practice squad. So I don't know if either one of these guys makes the 53. Meanwhile, at the receiver position, Montorie Foster Jr. only had 1 catch on Sunday night. It was a 24-yarder coming from Jalen Milroe. Definitely the best pass that Milroe threw all night. Nearly had a diving touchdown in the end zone, just couldn't quite gather it at the ground and maintain possession of it. It was a phenomenal effort. But I think Montorie Foster, every other player I talk about on here, I think is on the bubble. I don't think Montorie Foster Jr. is on the bubble at this point. With Jake Bobo now being done for the season, we got to see Foster's block on the safety that sprung Jacardia Wright for the 69-yard touchdown. The running back pointed it out afterwards at the press conference. So he's shown he can block. He had 2 tackles on special teams as well. So he just keeps delivering when he has his opportunities. And the injury to Bobo, the fact that the other receivers didn't stand out on Sunday night, to me, this is now a lock. I think that Montorie Foster Jr. is on this roster. I was leaning that way with Cody White going into this game, and now I'm not so sure. You don't want to put too much stock in one game, in a preseason game, especially for a player like Cody White, who has been pretty consistently reliable when he's gotten his chances to play in regular season games. But he only had one catch for 8 yards in this game. He badly muffed a punt that led to 3 points for the Titans on special teams. And Jalen Milroe had one of his better throws of the night right in the breadbasket for Cody White on a deep ball. Those of you watched on YouTube, you can see a picture of that. The ball just bounced off of his chest. He couldn't reel it in. It just felt like there were opportunities there for Cody White to help himself and secure that roster spot. What does still help him is that he is the closest thing Seattle has size-wise to Jake Bobo. He's 6'3", 215. Very similar build. He's a more athletic version of Jake Bobo. Not as good of a blocker, not close as good of a blocker, but he's got the size metric. He's a really solid special teams player, at least most of the time he is. He's not going to be returning punts anyway, but that was still a big mistake in this game. So I think he's probably going to make this team, but this could be a game that ends up making it that the Seahawks decide, you know what, we're going to stock up in another position. We're going to get Cody White back in the practice squad. I expect he's going to be around, but I don't know that this means he makes the 53. Montorie Foster, in their hand, I think very much is on the 53. On the offensive line, Seattle's got some interesting things to think about because now that Mason Richmond, it looks like at least, he's going to miss this season. We don't know the injury. My speculation has been an Achilles, seeing the way that trainers were looking at the back of his foot, ankle area when he was down on the ground and the way he walked off. But we'll see what the actual update is from the Seahawks on that front. But it looks like Richmond's going to be out for a significant amount of time, most likely done for the season. So that maybe lends itself that Seattle could keep both these players that I'm going to mention. I don't know that ends up being the case, though. Bo Stevens, the 5th-round pick out of Iowa, I thought played better on Sunday night than he did in his debut against the Cowboys. He didn't have any penalties, didn't allow any sacks, did give up a couple of pressures, had a couple rough pass pro reps. Run blocking was hit and miss as well. But I thought he took a step up from the first game where he struggled quite a bit against Dallas in that first preseason game. I feel like he was better overall in this one. He's still going to have to go out here on Friday night and show he can take another step forward. I think the Seahawks are going to want to keep him as a rookie, as a 5th-round pick that they traded a future pick to get back into the draft to land him. And because he's a rookie, he might be a much harder player to sneak through to the practice squad. But Mason Richmond being out certainly helps him because now he can move up potentially to that second line. The same can be said with Bryce Cabledew, who I do not think has had a very good training camp. Preseason games, he's looked pretty decent. And this is kind of the way last year was for him as a rookie. He didn't have a great training camp, and then when they got into game action, he was a lot better. He only gave it 1 pressure, no sacks, and no penalties in this game. 22 snaps that I have logged for him against the Titans. Had a couple nice run blocks in the second half as well. Cabledew, again, he's an interesting one just because the game suggests that he should be on the roster. If you've been at the practices, he's been on the third-team offense and just doesn't seem like he is on this team. I think if Mason Richmond's healthy, he does not make this football team. But right now, because Richmond is hurt and likely out for the season, or at least going to miss a big chunk of the season, I think that Cabledew has a much better chance of making this team. It is now much more possible that both these guys make it, but the way that Christian Haynes played on Sunday night might make it that Seattle has to decide between one or the other, because I don't know if they're going to be able to afford to keep 3 backup guards on their roster. The fact that Cabledew was a tackle in college, though, may help him a little bit here. If I had to pick between the two, I think Stevens gets on first, but there's a chance, a small chance, both these guys get onto the roster once the cutdown date arrives later this month. Let's get to the defensive side of the ball. And one of the challenges that I posed for this Seahawks team going into the second preseason game, just wanted to see anyone rise up on the defensive line to rush the passer. And we did see that happen with a couple of players, but in particular, Connor O'Toole busting out the toolbox. We got to see the athleticism. We had an opportunity to see speed turned into power. 1.5 sacks, 6 pressures, had a big tackle for loss on quarterback Will Levis on 3rd and 3, the final play of the third quarter, brought him down for a 5-yard loss, just completely obliterated that designed quarterback run. I thought O'Toole was Seattle's best player on defense on Sunday night. Now, it's a preseason game. There were a few of the plays that he made where I'm still wondering, looking at the film, what the tackles he was going up against were thinking or doing. You could tell that you had some third-string tackles that were in the lineup, but I'm not going to take that away from Connor O'Toole. Connor O'Toole was fast. He was explosive. He was decisive. And when he got in the backfield, he finished plays. He also had a partial sack with Jamie Sheriff, who I thought was pretty effective in this game as well, but not to the level Connor O'Toole was. And this guy was on the roster all of his rookie season, in part because he's a pretty darn good special teams player. This, to me, puts him on the right side of the bubble again. I think he was very much squarely on the bubble that could have gone either way. But a performance like this with his special team skills that he has shown in regular season games to this point, and the fact he's still pretty raw at this edge position. You have to remember he was a receiver at Utah. I think Connor O'Toole is back on the right side of the bubble after this performance. I think that was a big enough performance for him that it changed that for him. And Seattle's going to feel like, we can't really skip him to the practice squad with what he put on film in this game. On the flip side, I think Jalen Gaines, who was to me the biggest bright spot in the edge group in the Dallas game to open the preseason, he was pretty quiet in this second preseason game. So I think the 53-man roster at this point is probably a pipe dream for the second-year player out of Illinois State. He did have one pressure, but we haven't seen him turn those pressures into any quarterback hits or sacks the way that Connor O'Toole did. And he's had some inconsistencies defending the run in these two preseason games. I think Gaines has still got a decent chance to end up back on the practice squad. The Seahawks like him. The coaching staff believes that he is a player that is an ascending one, that is developing well. But Connor O'Toole's performance, coupled with the fact that Gaines had a pretty quiet night and he hasn't had splash plays to this point, O'Toole's got more athletic traits that jump off the chart as well. I think that O'Toole is the one that makes this roster, and Gaines right now, probably your best bet. Go out and have another good performance against Kansas City and hope that you can get on the practice squad. That is probably the best bet for him. Now, one of the more compelling battles that is still going on is at linebacker, and Patrick O'Connell being out with a knee injury has kind of opened this up a little bit because Chris Paul Jr., also known as Pooh as his nickname, has been banged up most of training camp, didn't really do much in the preseason opener, and he finally looks like he's past the ankle injury that has been dogging him for much of the month of August. He had a couple massive plays on Sunday night. He finished second on the team with 8 tackles. He had a fourth down run stuff on Tajay Spears, one of the top running backs for Tennessee, one of their first drives on Sunday night in Tennessee territory, going for it on 4th and short. Paul stuffed him at the line of scrimmage for no gain. He also was involved in a 3-yard tackle for loss. Athleticism and disruptive ability have always been calling cards for Chris Paul Jr. The biggest question mark coming into the league was his size, and he's added some much-needed muscle to his frame. That's why I was excited to watch him when training camp opened. Then that injury hit, and he just didn't get the chance to really make the impact that I thought he could. But I wonder if he's put himself back in the discussion. Right now, I think he's a practice squad player, but at least he has put himself back in the discussion with the way he played on Sunday night. Chaz Surratt, though, made it a little bit tougher on Chris Paul in this game because Chaz Surratt had a fantastic performance. He only had 4 tackles, but he had a strip sack. He punched the ball out of Cam Ward's hand. He had a couple other really nice tackles. He was flying all over the field. I thought Surratt was one of Seattle's most effective defenders in this game. So for as much progress as Paul made, Chris Paul has not shown that he is the caliber special teams player that Chaz Surratt is. I think between these two, Chaz Surratt is still probably the one that gets on the roster, especially if Patrick O'Connell's banged up. And Patrick O'Connell is not a guarantee to make this team. He could be another Cody White type situation where the Seahawks want to keep him around, but they know they can get him to the practice squad. So Chaz Surratt could be an instance of a player that had a really good performance on defense. They know what he can do in special teams. I have him with a slight edge on Chris Paul, but Chris Paul's got one more audition here where he could maybe force the Seahawks' hand if he really splashes. Might be a player they think they have a hard time getting back to the practice squad, and that dictates those final decisions. 2 players that I want to discuss in the secondary. 7th-round pick Michael Dansby, who I have raved about throughout training camp. I've really been impressed by the kid. And I think Andre Fuller's done a lot of good things as well. And Fuller had a really nice pass breakup against Cam Ward and Eric Aomaner, the receiver for Tennessee, had a really good rep there on third down that forced Tennessee to take a field goal on their first drive. But I thought Michael Dansby had a fantastic game. 4 tackles. He had a really nice pass breakup in coverage himself. Did have one missed tackle. Both he and Fuller missed one, so they weren't perfect in that regard. But overall, I have been pleased with what I've seen from Michael Dansby as a tackler. That was my biggest question mark going into these preseason games based on what I had seen on his Arizona tape. He's looked willing, he's looked physical, and he's been able to get guys to the ground on most of the tackle attempts he's had in these first 2 games. Because Trayvon Diggs is now in town, I don't know that Michael Dansby gets on this roster, but he has got to be a priority practice squad guy if they can slip him through. I think right now, because there's so many corners in the league, that Seattle's probably got a decent chance to be able to do that, as well as with Andre Fuller. But it's going to depend what he does Friday night. If he has a splashy outing, if he gets his hands on a pick, like that can change things in a preseason game. So I got him just on the outside looking in right now, with Diggs expected, in my opinion, to be on the roster to start the season. But Dansby's a guy I think is going to make some plays at some point for the Seattle Seahawks. And the last player I'm going to mention here, if this would have been done 4 days ago, there's no way that I would have even discussed this player. And it's not because I don't think he's a good one. It's just that Maxon Hook was at the bottom of the food chain at safety. But there are so many injuries there at that spot now, including Bud Clark with a broken ankle suffered on Sunday night. I look at the players the Seahawks have that are healthy right now at safety. And you can discuss players like A.J. Finley. Rodney Thomas has had hand surgery. Maybe he comes back fairly quickly from that. But the player, as far as health, being healthy, that could fill Bud Clark's role most effectively, in my opinion, it is Maxon Hook. This is a player that at Toledo, and he played at a star-studded secondary with a bunch of future NFL guys, he racked up interceptions in bunches. He's got ball skills. He is best fit at that free safety position, but he can play in the box because he's a willing tackler. There's a physicality to his game. He can play both safety spots. He just hasn't had a chance to show what he can do up to this point because there's been so many good safeties on the roster. But now with these injuries, Maxon Hook had a tackle in the backfield on Dearness Johnson Sunday night where he was shot out of a cannon, got flying downhill, and nailed him several yards downfield. Hasn't given up a catch in his limited reps in these 2 preseason games. I think he's done some decent things with the third-team defense in training camp. I just didn't have him on the radar to make this team until some of these injuries hit. But I think he's a better fit to replace what Bud Clark does. He's not a carbon copy. He's not the same athlete, but I think he's a better fit to do that than A.J. Finley is on this roster. Rodney Thomas, when healthy, probably is the best fit there, but who knows if he's going to be available. So I think right now Maxon Hook is clearly a guy that you hope you're just going to keep him around the practice squad to keep developing, but I could see him playing some snaps, at least on special teams, and being a backup in the first few weeks of the season as Seattle tries to right the ship here depth-wise at that position. And I kind of see him where Tayakata was at in his second year, where if he gets some opportunities to play, we could see Maxon Hook be a guy that in year 3 could take a big jump and maybe be somebody that you can count on to contribute if you need him to. So I don't think he makes the 53. I don't think he's on that bubble, but I think now he's much more important to keep around on the practice squad, and it'll be fun to see him get a lot of reps on Friday night against the Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure to subscribe to Emerald City Spectrum, emeraldcityspectrum.com, all Seattle sports all the time. We literally have every pro and college team in the region covered. $6 a month, $60 a year. Make sure to check it out. Again, that's emeraldcityspectrum.com.